Hello and welcome to Campaign Chronicles, France 24's regular countdown to the presidential election. With 14 weeks to go, things are hotting up. Coming up in the show, taboo no more. Do voters really think the far-right FN is a party like any other? Will 2012 be different? What's the likelihood that neither big party will make it into the second round? And in Faces and Places, we're heading to Guadeloupe to find out what French voters more than 6,000 kilometres from Paris make of it all. First then, the far-right Front National party has been the pariah of French politics, but shunned as they are by mainstream parties, their poll figures now mean the FN is a force to be reckoned with. And voting for them isn't the taboo it used to be.
This is Le Crotoy in the north of France. With its struggling fishing port and its statue of Joan of Arc, it's fertile ground for the Front National. Indeed, the party's representative, Yvan Flao, lost local elections last year by just 6 votes.
Vous donnez un petit tract?
Oui.
C'est sur le coût de l'immigration dans notre pays.
And his message doesn't fall on deaf ears.
Qu'est-ce que vous pensez du Front National, madame?
They're better than anyone.
Indeed, it would seem voting Front National is no longer something to be ashamed of.
She has to win.
Vous allez voter pour elle?
Of course.
He's talking about the party's new leader, Marine Le Pen, the main reason for the FN's recent resurgence.
You hear a lot of people saying "Long live Marine." We're behind you. They don't say Le Pen, they say Marine.
Du temps de Jean-Marie Le Pen, c'était pas possible?
C'était autrement, quoi.
It was different. Now it's Marine, Marine, Marine.
Marine Le Pen's personality is key then. She took over from her father, Jean-Marie, last year. Her first task was to overhaul the Front National's image. That job has been handed to Florian Philippot, a recent recruit at campaign headquarters in Paris. In his office, there's a portrait of Charles de Gaulle, but not the party's own honorary president, Le Pen Senior. In fact, Jean-Marie Le Pen is nowhere to be seen.
Il est où donc le bureau de Jean-Marie Le Pen?
There isn't one.
As voters adapt to the party's new image, so too must polling institutes. In the past, polls had to be tweaked, sometimes doubled, to account for people denying they voted for the far-right party. But that's now changed.
To say that you're going to vote Front National and for Marine Le Pen, well, people admit it much more now. It's a vote people dare to admit. More and more people say, I'm going to vote Marine Le Pen.
One reason for that, the party's rebranding. The leadership wants to shed its old image as a racist movement, instead focusing on economic issues like jobs. With recent polls saying almost a third of French voters agree with its ideas, the Front National is increasingly seen as a party like any other.
Donc le Front National,
The Front National is, rightly or wrongly, no longer really considered xenophobic or fascist.
il devient tout à fait dissible.
That makes it much more acceptable than before to admit to voting for Marine Le Pen.
On va voter pour Marine Le Pen.
Voting for the Front National may no longer be taboo, but with over 60% of voters still undecided about their choice, no one can accurately predict the outcome, and the possibility that Marine Le Pen may cause an upset still can't be excluded.
Well, I'm joined here in the studio now by Campaign Chronicles reporter Luke Brown. Good to see you, Luke. We've been hearing a lot about the big two parties, the ruling UMP and the left-wing PS. This week, the focus has been on their rivals, though, and a somewhat unpalatable possibility.
Yes, what could happen if on the evening of the first round of voting, April the 22nd, neither of the big two parties make it through to the second round? That would most likely leave the centrist François Bayrou against the far-right Marine Le Pen. That is the premise of this new novel that's just come out, The Panic in the Elysée. The author of that is a former advisor to Nicolas Sarkozy. Let's take a listen to his latest message for the president.
All is not lost for Nicolas Sarkozy. He needs to know which direction to take when he enters the campaign. And the direction he needs is to move towards the centre.
So this is a fictional book, but how realistic might this actual outcome be?
Well, there are two very important things to consider. This first up is that we're very much in a perfect storm for Marine Le Pen. She's capitalising on three big key issues. First of those is the tanking economy, and then there is, of course, the dissatisfaction amongst French voters for the traditional two big parties. And as well as her personality, as we've seen, it is more acceptable to vote for her than it was for her father. That is being reflected in quite a few polls. The most recent of them and perhaps most worrying for the big parties, but are at 21.5%. That's just 2 points behind Nicolas Sarkozy. Equally important then, the poll figures for François Bayrou. They too are on the up. The most recent one for him puts him about 15% voting intentions. That is higher than at the same stage back in 2007. It does seem that his Made in France campaign theme is helping to broaden his appeal, especially to working class voters. It is worth pointing out, though, that these two parties that we're talking about, the Modem and the Front National, they are politically distant, but they do represent, to a certain extent, a protest vote for French voters. Remember as well, back in 2002, there was the big breakthrough for the FN. Back in 2007, we saw François Bayrou almost having his big breakthrough. The big two parties then are likely to be concerned that 2012 could be a combination of all that, plus that protest vote, and they could be left out in the cold.
OK, well, let's have a wrap of the week's news now with a football star lending his fame to a good cause, a centrist who's increasingly isolated, and religion causing controversy for the environmentalists.
It sounds like a surefire vote winner. But one candidate's call for more public holidays has turned into political poison. The devil is in the detail, perhaps. The Green champion Eva Joly has proposed that just like at Christmas,
I want Jews and Muslims to be able to celebrate Yom Kippur and Eid with a public holiday.
Out of the question for the Conservatives and the Socialists. Both say it goes against France's traditional division between religion and state.
Home sweet home. The Socialist Party finally unveiled its campaign headquarters this week. Strategically close to Parliament, it's based in the chic 7th arrondissement and a snip at just €40,000 a month. The party also spelled out its new slogan, "Change is now." But despite that optimistic message, there's still no definitive programme. A lack of clarity once again seized upon by the Conservative UMP party. This time they attacked what they called Hollande's muddled plans to reform tax breaks for families.
With friends like this, who needs enemies? That's the question for centrist Hervé Morin. MPs from his own party have called on him to abandon his bid for the presidency. They say his stubbornness could endanger their seats in Parliament. But even as his poll figures stagnate at under 1%, Morin insists he won't be taking their advice.
And does King Eric now want to play at being president? 15 years since hanging up his boots, legendary footballer Eric Cantona strode back into the floodlights this week. He said he wants to enter the presidential race. Even if Cantona admits he won't go all the way, his goal is to raise awareness of poor quality housing. It's not the first time a famous and popular figure has run. Back in 1981, comedian Coluche polled at 16% until dropping out a month before the vote.
OK, well, it's time now for Faces and Places, France 24's weekly rendezvous with voters. This week, we're heading to the sunny overseas department of Guadeloupe. Now, it may be thousands of miles away in the Caribbean, but it's as much a part of France as anywhere on the mainland. Our host is a teacher who's worried about government spending cuts. And to make matters worse, prices on the island keep on rising.
Alexandre has been teaching maths for 13 years. He's a devoted but worried teacher. The number of pupils in each class is growing, 28 on average in Guadeloupe. And the fact the government recently announced job cuts is only fueling his fears.
We've been asked to improve our teaching methods, to help pupils who have difficulties, to listen more, and of course, the news of job cuts doesn't make sense, given what the Education Ministry expects from us. As a teacher, I can't accept this situation.
Seen as a holiday paradise, Guadeloupe has been affected by growing violence plus a very high unemployment rate, 22.6%. That's 12 points more than the French national average. Alexandra worries about what lies ahead for the island's youth.
They have nothing to do, and when you see the number of young people on the streets at night, you clearly see that they have no goals in life. The Education Ministry's budget is almost 61 billion euros, twice the defence budget. So you can't say that there are no financial means, but there's a clear lack of human resources.
But the biggest issue is the island's cost of living.
This 500-gram bag of pasta costs nearly €2. That's €1 more than on the mainland, but it's a vital commodity, so I have to buy it no matter what.
As a public servant living away from the mainland, Alexandra benefits from an additional 40% living allowance, but the prices of staple goods remain very high for the majority of the population.
The idea of a prices regulatory authority was talked about at some stage, but unfortunately no one talks about it anymore. Some people will tell you that the cost of transport has to be taken into account. That's not our fault. Here in Guadeloupe, we are far away from the mainland, and I think the government should bear this cost.
Alexandre has many wishes for 2012, but the one that he holds dear to him is a desire to become a school headmaster in the coming year.
Okay, well, that's all we've got time for in this edition. Thanks very much, Luke Brown, for being with us in the studio. Thank you for watching. Do check out our webpage or our Facebook page. There's also Luke's Twitter account. Let us know what you think. We'll see you next time for more Campaign Chronicles.